Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads on a 2015 Dodge Ram. This is the 1500 crew cab. Now the first thing I usually do is just with a screwdriver, I'll put it in here and push these caliper pistons back in. This time I'm going to do it a little bit different. I'm going to take the caliper off and then press that in with this caliper compression tool. Now the first thing we need to do is loosen and remove these two slide pin bolts. Those are a 13 millimeter. A lot of times when you loosen this, however, see the slide pin down here is spinning. So you may need to grab an open end wrench. It helps to have a thinner profile wrench. This is a 17 millimeter. It fits right on there and that'll hold that steady while you loosen and remove that. We'll do the same thing up above just to get these broken loose. Just to make this go a little quicker. And pull those out and set those aside. You can see they've got a little bit of thread lock on them. And then we can just kind of pry the caliper off. Now this is a heavy caliper, so you should hang it up with something. I'm just going to use this little hook. You put it over here on the spring, just so that that's not hanging from the brake line. And you see the way these springs are set up? They push the pads outward, or they push the pads apart. See right there? Just keep that in mind when we put in the new springs. This kit comes with new replacement springs, but we can pull the old pads out now. Pretty worn down. Same with this inside pad. I want to brush these areas, just get this all clean where the pads ride. Just grab a wire brush, clean those up a little bit. Pull out these slide pins here. Just kind of pull back on this rubber boot. And we're just going to wipe these clean. Sometimes I'll put it in again once or twice and get as much of that old grease off as I can. I'm sure there's a tool that they make to go in there to clean that. It's important that you use the right grease. This is sil-glyde. This is a silicone based grease. Most other types of grease don't do well here. They can cause corrosion and cause this to actually get stuck. So about that much. And then when you pull it back, just make sure that there's no additional air inside there. You almost have to pull and squeeze on this boot. It almost burps that. Make sure that that moves freely and that feels good. Same thing with the top one here. Get as much of that grease out of there as we can. And then again, we'll put a little bit more sil-glyde on here. Really doesn't take too much, but just kind of spread that around on that slide pin like so, and pull that in place. Alright, on the new pads here, I like to put a little bit of this sil-glyde on the back of the shim. Now this is rubberized, which will help cut down on some of the noise. Just a little thin layer of this sil-glyde on the back here where it makes contact with the outside edge here of the caliper. It looks like it's in the middle and then a little bit on either side. So we'll just kind of smear out a thin layer on the back side of the shim, and that will help eliminate some noise and some of the vibrations. Now these little clips are springs that go on the end of each pad, and they've got these little springs right here that will hold them in place. These don't really sit on there very tight. You kind of just got to set it on there, and then I'm going to put a little bit of this sil-glyde on the bottom of this little groove right here, just right inside there where this is going to ride. Also, just a little bit of sil-glyde on this clip, and then we'll just position this right up where it needs to go, like so. Looks good. Same with the inboard pad. A little bit of grease on the back of the shim here. Smear that around. Just a thin layer is all that you really need, and then we'll just set the clips in place. That's how they go. And I'm also going to put a little grease on the outside edge of each clip. And again, just a little bit on the outside edge of these channels, and that will prevent this from binding or hanging up while it sits inside here. Just needs to be able to move freely. And there we go. And you can see those go in, and the springs are working properly, pushing them outward. Just make sure that we don't let those fall out. Okay, now before we can put the caliper back on, we need to compress these pistons back inside. And I'm just going to use this caliper compression tool with an old brake pad. You could use a C-clamp or vice grips here too. I just want to get this set up, and what I'll do is probably alternate between each piston here. Before I turn these all the way in, let's go up and take a look underneath the hood and make sure we've got enough room inside the master cylinder. Here's a master cylinder reservoir right here where you can see the fluid line is well below the max line, so we've got enough room to push the caliper piston back in, which is going to push the fluid backwards up into this cylinder. All right, so we've got enough room inside there. We can just slowly turn this. A lot of times when people do this, when they push this caliper piston back in or these pistons back in, they'll open up the bleeder line here or the bleeder screw, and they'll crack that open and push the old fluid out through that and then add new fluid in the master cylinder. And that's not a bad way as well. If you do it that way, you probably will have to bleed the brakes because you are opening up the system and potentially letting a little bit of air get in there. Without opening that, it's not necessary to bleed the brakes. And I'm just going to alternate over here to this side. And that should do it. It's a handy tool. I'll get a link to this in the description. We can unhook this now. And then we'll squeeze those pads in and put the caliper back over them. Now here you also might need to pull on these slide pins a little bit to get that to line up. All right, then we can put these bolts back in. These slide pin bolts, we can just get these started by hand. You can see that slide pin spins very freely while trying to tighten this. So we're going to need to use our 17 millimeter open end here. The torque spec that I found on this is 24 foot-pounds. And you're done. Just remember, before you head on down the road, go ahead and step on your brake pedal a few times until it feels firm. Now don't press it all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. But what you're doing is pushing the caliper pistons back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Double check your torque specs in your manual. That 24 foot-pounds is just what I found online. Also remember to top off your master cylinder, or just make sure that fluid is at the correct level before you head on down the road. Hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll put a link in the description to the brake pads and some of the other parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.